It's illegal to be sad in China. No, I'm not kidding. China's made it illegal to be sad. If you express your sadness, you can go to jail, be disappeared, or worse. You see, it's called picking quarrels and provoking trouble. 寻衅滋事. It's Article 293 of the 1997 Criminal Code of the People's Republic of China. In Article 293, it says, whoever undermines public order with any one of the following provocative and disturbing behaviors is to be sentenced to not more than 5 years of a fixed term imprisonment, criminal detention, or control, willfully attacking another person, and the circumstances are bad, chasing, intercepting, or cursing another person, and the circumstances are bad, forcibly taking away, demanding, or willfully damaging or seizing public or private property, and the circumstances are serious, or creating a disturbance in a public place, causing serious disorder. And that last line is the important one. This tricky little law has been dictator Xi Jinping's calling card since he took over in 2011. However, I lived in China for 10 years and I started to see him really abusing it around 2015 and onwards. This Swiss Army knife of totalitarian laws can cover literally everything. And recently, China's been using it to silence sad people. Whether I'm on my computer or I'm on my phone, I make sure that I run a VPN, and so should you. A VPN is a secure tunnel that makes sure that nobody can see what you're doing online to keep all of your information safe. And the VPN that I choose to use is Surfshark VPN. Surfshark VPN is fantastic. It's super easy to use, it's really fast. You can pick servers from all across the world that offer the best speed by default. And what that does is it wraps your connection in a secure tunnel so that nobody can see your credit card information, who you are on the internet, what you're looking at, and there's also other features too. For example, as a world traveler, you might use Surfshark VPN to overcome location-based price discrimination on plane tickets and car rentals by connecting to VPN servers in different countries. It's jam-packed with features that go way beyond the basics, and it's super easy to install and run on unlimited devices on a single subscription. I absolutely love it. For a limited time, you're gonna get 83% off a 2-year plan, plus 3 extra months for free at surfshark.deals/Laowai86. This special offer makes your subscription just $2.21 a month. Go to surfshark.deals/Laowai86 and use the code Laowai86 to protect your online privacy today. Mourners, apathetic people suffering from melancholy, because in the People's Republic of China, you simply cannot be sad. Because you're supposed to be living in a utopia. China has now stopped reporting on youth unemployment. It's making people very sad, and you cannot talk about it anymore. A few videos back, I interviewed some Chinese people about how bad it actually was, and the long story short is, it's really bad. In fact, I went back and talked to some people in the city that I lived in, Huizhou, and it has gotten really terrible. It's hard to find work, and when you do find it, it is very poorly paid. In fact, some decent positions are only paying a few $100s per month. The government's response to the fact that China has one of the worst youth unemployment rates in the world, and it's getting much worse, is not to report it anymore. And if you want to make a stink about it, meaning you want to talk about it online, you want to talk about it with your friends, you want to complain about it, picking quarrels and provoking trouble. The old Swiss Army knife of laws that I had mentioned previously. And guess what? If you keep it up, you get arrested. You get disappeared. In fact, I lose contact with many dissidents that I talk to in China. But no, sorry. You cannot be sad in China. It's utopia. The same thing happened with the lie flat movement. The idea is that the government isn't gonna do anything to fix our problems. They're not gonna get us jobs, so we're gonna lie flat and we're gonna let this rot. We're gonna be apathetic. We're gonna protest by not doing anything. The youth protested the government by being apathetic. And then the government banned it. If you talk about lying flat or you shared images about it, you get arrested. You make a bigger deal out of it, and guess what? The police show up. And worse, you get disappeared. The housing market is currently collapsing in China. 2 juggernauts are going under, and that is a huge bulk of China's economy. People are losing their loans, their houses. Some people have paid and they haven't even been built yet, and they're not gonna get anything in return. This house of cards is in free fall, and if you complain, you go to jail. You cannot be sad about your lost life savings. The economy is currently circling the toilet bowl, and instead of being transparent to let people discuss their solutions, the Chinese government just bans talking about it. It's obliterated the amount of economic indicators that it releases to the world to see. It just pulled up a massive curtain over what it's actually doing, and it's going back to the same levels of transparency as Chairman Mao. But no, you can't be sad in China. It's utopia. In 2021, in the city of Zhengzhou, the government was showing off its amazing idea. And that idea was called sponge cities, meaning that cities simply can't flood. And guess what? It flooded. A 4-kilometer-long tunnel, completely chock full of cars, was filled to the brim in 5 minutes. It killed every single person inside. Now you do the math there. How many people do you think that is? Well, according to the government, 4 people died in that tunnel. A tunnel that was 4 kilometers long, filled to the brim with water and cars back to back in traffic. Only 4 people died. Does that logically make sense to you? Well, later on, the government declared that the entire flood, the flood that displaced millions and millions of people and affected millions of people, moved them out of their homes, people died floating down the streets, the whole flood only killed 300 people in the end. If you look at the cars that were pulled out and later put on a field, you can see that not only is that simply impossible that 4 people died in that tunnel, but the most insanely, ridiculously conservative, I'm talking living in a fantasy world figure, would put it at a bare minimum of 5,000 people. In the tunnel, not just the flood, just in the tunnel alone. Not to mention the huge swath of China that was flooded. Naturally, people will want to lay flowers at the scene of the tragedy because they're mourning, they're sad, people they knew died. Well, the government didn't want people to see how many flowers were being laid. They cleared them out. That's what they thought of people's mourning. They cleared out the flowers. And when more flowers showed up at the entrance, they censored them with barriers. They literally erected barriers so that people couldn't see the flowers. They didn't want people to do the math on how many people actually died. In fact, when people questioned the death toll, people that lost family members, daughters, sons, wives, grandparents, they were arrested. Words about the numbers or floods were blocked. You see, there was a joke in the Soviet Union that people are just a number. They're not even people anymore. But in the CCP-led China, you're not even a number. You're erased from memory. You're nothing. But no, I'm wrong. You cannot be sad in China. It's a utopia. When China's most famous human rights activist and Nobel Peace Prize winner, Liu Xiaobo, died in a torturous Chinese prison, China blocked the candle emoji so that people couldn't mourn his death. A man who championed and stood up for the rights of the Chinese people was banned from existence. And then people couldn't even show a digital candle in his honor. You cannot be sad in China, though. It's a utopia. In 2022, millions of people across the country poured out in mourning of the victims of a fire in Western China. It was in a city called Urumqi. The victims died because the government wouldn't allow people to rescue the victims because of COVID restrictions. In fact, this happened a lot around China. People held up white pieces of paper because they knew they couldn't say or do anything, but even that was banned. The protests were squashed, they were smothered, they were stopped in their tracks. Protesters gathered on a road called Urumqi Road in Shanghai because it had the same name of the city of the fire. And the government response was to remove the sign so that people didn't see it. After they squashed the mourners' movement, they trained police to censor people with giant black sheets. If anyone showed up with a white piece of paper, I'm not making this up. But no, I'm sorry. You cannot be sad in China. It's utopia. China has banned any and all discussion of the mourning of the victims of its genocide it's carrying out on millions of Uyghur minorities in Western China. But you cannot be a sad Uyghur, and you cannot mourn sad Uyghurs because you will be arrested. In fact, countless Uyghurs are currently in prison for even doing something like using a VPN on the internet. But no, I'm sorry, you can't be sad in China. It's a utopia. People were dropping like flies from COVID in China, but rather than report on the numbers, China hid them. They told the rest of the world that COVID wasn't contagious, and they got the WHO to relay this message to the world. They allowed people to leave the country, and they silenced anyone that questioned the origin or the true death toll. And in the end, the country that COVID came from, China, had 10% of the deaths that the US had. They also blamed it on everyone but themselves. You question this figure or the origin of COVID, or you mourn your dead relative, you go to jail or you disappear. But I'm sorry, again, no, I'm wrong. You cannot be sad in China. It's utopia. The recent floods in Beijing are the biggest recent farce. China has claimed that 33 people died in the worst flooding in 140 years. Millions again were displaced, and China banned discussion of the flooding damage to the point where when I spoke to people in China, they didn't even know it existed. One of the most apocalyptic floods that wiped out a huge area. Some people literally didn't know that it happened. When bridges collapsed, they didn't rescue the victims. No, they put up metal barriers so that people couldn't see it and discuss the damage and poor quality of China's infrastructure. Entire villages and towns were sacrificed to prevent the flood from affecting government leadership in downtown Beijing. But everyone's voice was silenced. These families were shut down. You cannot be sad in China. It's utopia. I could do this all day. I could make a 10-hour video on a case-by-case basis to show you what happens when you allow authoritarianism to take over. While Americans bicker amongst themselves about tribal politics, a behemoth of a dictatorship called China is erasing its own people, silencing its critics, even abroad, and trying to call the shots in your own country, all while sick, corrupt people cheer it on. No, the issue is not your partisan politics. It's foreign influence campaigns that have seeped into what you consume. Instead of unifying to understand the clear threat that the world is dealing with, people would rather delude themselves into thinking their problems come within. The disinformation campaigns from China and Russia to dismantle the US and other democracies around the world and to make people lose trust in their institutions and media is working. And China thinks you are but a mere pawn in its plan. Life under China's government is a nightmare for its people who speak out, and hopefully you've gotten a little glimpse of why that's a future you probably don't want. If you want up-to-date current events news, you gotta join my live show called The China Show. It's every single Friday. We cover the latest and craziest stuff that's coming out of China, whether it's good, bad, somewhere in the middle, everything that's important out of China, we cover it. We have people on the ground there that we get reports from, and we do our own research as well. I highly recommend it. It's super entertaining and it's very informative. Go to The China Show and make sure you're subscribed there. Thanks.